All right, let's roll.
The Mikey Show Podcast.
And here we go. I'm your host, Mark Meinke, and this is the Meinke Show Podcast. All right. Today on the show, we are so pleased to have back in studio our Member of Parliament for Foothills, Mr. John Barlow. John, thank you so much for being here, sir.
It's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, you betcha. Well, we had some fun last time. And are you okay for refreshments, or could I get you a drink box water bottle?
No,
kind of thingy.
I'll stick with my tea.
You don't want a drink box water bottle kind of thingy?
No.
Okay. So election's coming up pretty short.
Yeah.
Just around the corner here, October. How are we doing?
I feel good. Obviously, in our riding, we've been knocking on doors and going to see as many people as we possibly can. We do that all the time. We don't just wait until election time to do those things, but fantastic response here in Foothills, which is encouraging. But we also have to focus on what's going on across Canada. I think it's going to be a tight election, but in my opinion, Mark, I feel this is one of the most important elections in Canadian history.
You got that right. How the polls doing for us?
Polls are close. Have us pretty much neck and neck, depending on what poll you look at, which I think for us is a good position to be in. You have to take a look back at the 2015 election. When we lost and Justin Trudeau won, no one gave us a chance to win in 2019. Everybody said this is the most popular prime minister in Canadian history. He's going to be there for as long as he wants. So it shows you how things have changed in just 4 short years. A lot of people would say it's been 4 long years. But I think people are starting to see who Justin Trudeau really, truly is. And,
a year to a year and a half ago, John, I would have said, God damn it, Mr. Nicehair is going to get back in again. And then the scandals after scandal after scandal, all of which go unanswered. There's no consequences for any of them. That's a bit of a bummer.
Right. I guess the ultimate consequence is he loses.
Yeah.
The voters have, and I hear that a lot, Aga Khan, India, the first prime minister in Canadian history to be found in violations of ethics rules.
Twice.
4 cabinet ministers have also been found contravening ethics rules, and really no consequences. But Canadians have the ultimate hammer in this, and that is don't elect him. Don't re-elect the Liberals, and show that you have to have ethics are a critical, integral part of politics, and this is why people are jaded about politics.
The stumbles and the bumbles, and the SNCLavalin, and the Wilson-Raybould, and the Jane Philpott. It seems like all yesterday's news already. Do you think Canada's forgotten, or will they remember for the election?
No, I don't think they've forgotten. It's certainly not at the front of mind right now. We're in the dead of summer, but I think once the national campaign kicks off in September, these things will come back. And we knew with Justin Trudeau that this wasn't going to be one issue that brought him down. This is going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And that's really what we have seen, is these things just continue to erode that Trudeau brand, this Sunny Ways brand, which is completely false. This is one of the most egotistical, petulant people I've ever met in my life.
Got an example?
If I have to sit across from him almost every day in question period, right?
Lucky you.
Lucky me. And people don't see it on camera all the time. But he is, he's nasty. He's taught, the language he uses to our members. But I would say, I guess the most public example I would say that Canadians, and I think this was a turning point, is when First Nations protesters came to that Liberal fundraiser, and he started mocking them. Thanks for your donation. Really appreciate your donation, and then kicked them out. And that's who he is. And Canadians weren't seeing it until that, but that is who he is.
He's the exact opposite of the image.
I will give the Liberals a ton of credit. They have done an amazing job of marketing him as a celebrity. Substance doesn't matter. This is all about shine. This is all about that celebrity marketing.
He's an empty suit.
Sure, I will say that there's not a lot of substance there. It's a lot of flash.
Say something nice about Justin Trudeau. What's he doing right?
Yeah, you have to say that not everything is wrong. And there are some Liberal MPs who I get along with very well. We have to work together.
Yeah.
When you have a company basically of 338 employees, you have to find ways to work with one another. So there are some MPs on the Liberal side that I'm in work with in committee that I think we do some really good work. Unfortunately, you don't see that trickled up to the top all that often.
What's the biggest scandal in the Trudeau years here? What's the worst one? What's the top three?
Well, I'd say SNCLavalin, I think, is the worst in my opinion. It shows that you have the Prime Minister influencing our judicial system, and that's one of the things we are told as soon as you are elected. The judiciary and legislative are separate; they do not cross paths. You have to honor the independence of the judiciary. So for the Prime Minister to try and influence a court decision or the court process on a corporation in Canada is extremely alarming. I don't think there's any reason we want to change that in Canada, where our elected officials are protecting or choosing winners and losers in the court system. I think that's the worst. The Mark Norman case, I really wish that would have gone to court. Because I think that also shows how they were trying to influence outcomes when it comes to corporate Canada.
So give us a sort of a Reader's Digest version of the Mark Norman case.
Well, Mark Norman was second in command of our Canadian military. Under our Conservative government, we had given a contract to build 2 interim supply ships. We gave them to Davie Shipyards. The first ship, they finished it on time and under budget, which never happens in public sector. So one of our last decisions in government was to give them the second interim supply ship. In Trudeau's first cabinet meeting after they won government in 2015, his first cabinet meeting, several ministers, it's public, including Scott Bryson from Nova Scotia and Dominic LeBlanc from New Brunswick, tried to, they did. They basically put that second contract on hold to try and give it to Irving Shipyards, a very close friend of the Liberal government. And when that started to go sideways, people started to find out. They blamed the leaks on Mark Norman, and his career has been ruined. For 2 years, they threw him under the bus. He started a GoFundMe page to help for his defense, and he never did get back into his previous role.
How much of Mark Norman's legal bill did the government actually cover?
0.
So they said that they would cover it, and now they've backed out?
We have not heard that they have covered 1 penny as of yet.
Okay, so again, an empty promise.
An empty promise, and a very well-decorated, highly respected member of the Canadian military was dragged through the mud for 2 years, career ruined, and what has he got to fall back on? For a government, again, Trudeau said, I'll never fight Canadian veterans at court, but you destroy the career of one of our most respected and highly decorated military people.
What was in it for the Liberals? Like, why?
Saving their own bacon, right? They never. I guess that's one of the biggest frustrations. I've never seen Trudeau take responsibility for anything,
or say sorry, except for I'm sorry for what our great granddaddy did last, on some Tuesday in the 1700s,
right?
But not I'm sorry for what I did. That I did something wrong. That I made a mistake. I've never heard it.
No, I've never heard that either. And this was one where he could have said, you know what? This is what we were thinking about. Obviously, this is not the way we should be going. I'm stopping this right now. He didn't do that. He, alleged that Mark Norman was responsible for the leak. Said he was going to be in court before he was even charged. So again, it shows him interfering with the judicial system. Even with the Judy Wilson-Raybould case, once that started to get a little offside, he could have easily stepped in and said, you know what, we thought about giving SNCLavalin a break. Obviously, that's not where Canadians want us to go. Our judicial system and the Attorney General said we can't do that. We apologize. We're going to move on. He couldn't even do that.
The first time that you were here, John, I kept pushing for what are we going to do for consequences? What are we going to do and you sidestepped it, and you're sidestepping it again today. Why? Like, why should there not be actual legal consequences for our Prime Minister?
Well, I think there should be, with everything that we've seen. I think there has to be consequences. And there, a $200 fine for the Aga Khan trip is
Jesus
ridiculous, right? I think there has to be something stronger than just getting a letter from the ethics commissioner saying, yes, you violated the ethics rules. Here's your $250 fine. It's ridiculous. There's no accountability there. And I think through all of this, if Canadians expect anything, they expect us to be accountable for the decisions that we make. And this is not that. I don't know what that penalty would be, but I think there has to be a hammer there.
Well, even something as much as his refusal to answer questions in question period. Is there anything in the House rules where he can be held in contempt of House for never actually answering a question? Is that even a thing?
It's not really a thing. It's up to the speaker to ensure that they stay on topic, but it's such a wide berth to that. I've seen it very rarely, more in debates where the speaker will say, get back on topic, but there's really nothing in the procedures to force him to answer the question.
If he gets back in, and I don't think he will, the Western voice, if he gets back in, Alberta separatism is going to be a real thing.
I agree.
There's no way around it.
I agree.
I mean, it's been rumbling since I was a kid, but it's never been serious.
Right.
And now the press has been pretty critical about Jason Kenney saying, no, honestly, Alberta separation or Western separation is a thing. Like, what else are we going to do?
Right.
We're the redheaded stepkid here. Like, throw me a bone. But it's getting real. And I honestly believe that another 4 years of JT and we're out. I actually believe that. What's your feeling on it?
I agree. I've never felt it to the extent that I'm feeling it now. Certainly, we've had moments over our history where that Western alienation has been true. One of the reasons the Reform Party started, but certainly in the last decade under Stephen Harper, we never had it like to this extent because our confederation was united. But under Justin Trudeau, who has been extremely divisive, and the Senate decisions on C-69 and C-48 are paramount to that. I believe that if Justin Trudeau wins in October, there will be a massive resurgence of that Alberta, not just Alberta, I would think Saskatchewan, even Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and parts of BC would be right there along with us in terms of understanding the Confederation is broken and wanting to leave.
Do you believe that a Justin Trudeau fever dream includes Fort McMurray turning into a ghost town?
I do believe that. I don't think there's any question. I believe that Justin Trudeau...
Because they're halfway there.
They're halfway there. And Catherine McKenna is a Minister of Environment and Climate Change. These are ideologues. They are not making decisions based on science, or if that was the case, C-69 and C-48 would have died on the table. They are basing their decisions, and this is where I think politics is going wrong, is you have a very vocal minority, 10% of the population, which is now driving policy. Governments and politicians are making policy based on a very vocal, very small minority of activists. That is wrong. That very quiet majority has to start getting vocal, being proactive, if we are going to make sure our Canada goes in the right direction.
What's the biggest argument, John, that's being touted as science, but is actually not science?
Well, I guess first of all would be the impact of the fossil fuel industry. I was just reading a book called Factfulness. If anyone hasn't had a chance to read that, I would highly recommend it. Talking about how media and politics are favoring that very, very small minority and making decisions based on that because they just don't have the right data. And I think that's a big part of that is we are shutting down our fossil fuel industry here in Canada, or trying to phase it out, as the Liberals like to say, thinking that we're going to save the world. But if you take, for example, Canadian LNG or our oil that's developed under the most strict environmental standards in the world, most strict human rights standards in the world, we export that to places like China, India, who are not developing their resources at that standard, and we take them off coal-fired power plants. You replace it with a cleaner source. Isn't that actually going to have a major impact on global GHG emissions and climate change? Wouldn't that make more sense than us shutting down our industry, which is 1.6% of GHG emissions, doesn't make any sense. And I guess the second one that just came out recently was the UN report that agriculture is killing our planet. Our farmers and ranchers have come so far in the last couple of decades in terms of innovation and technology. We have zero tillage now.
What's the point of a report like that? What exactly are we supposed to eat?
Well,
are we supposed to live off universe juice?
I don't know if they think that an urban farm with me growing my organic carrots and stuff in my backyard is going to feed the world. Like, I'm not too sure how they think along that line, Mark, that if we shut down our agriculture, the traditional practices that we do, we can't feed the world. 80% of what we grow in Canada is exported to other countries to help them meet their needs. I'm not exactly sure how they feel like they're going to replace that.
How are the farmers doing right now?
Our farmers are frustrated. They're angry.
What's the biggest problem with the farmers? Is it the China relations?
China relations, and I think it's just an overall, I think it's two things. They don't feel like they've ever been attacked the way they are right now. You have a government right now on the federal side who is doing everything possible to make their lives miserable. The number one tool for our farmers and ranchers is export. They have lost their most important export markets in the last 2 years, thanks to the Trudeau government. And it's directly as a result of political decisions.
So what's the path there? Like, what actually happened that killed those markets?
Well, the trip to India was the first one. We had a very tenuous agreement with India for our pulses and peas and a fumigation step that we had to go through that was to be renegotiated. But because of how Trudeau treated that relationship with India, I like to call it the tickle trunk tour of India.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
it's quite apt.
It is quite apt.
And if nobody knows what the tickle trunk is, it's because you've never watched Mr. Dress Up. YouTube it.
That's right. And that just destroyed our relationship with India. And now to see that Jerry Butts, Trudeau's right-hand man, is now blaming the Indian government. We walked into a buzzsaw and they tried to mess up our trip is ridiculous. No one forced Justin Trudeau to be wearing these ridiculous costumes and doing a Bollywood dance at receptions.
Did you get any firsthand feedback from any of the officials in India about that trip?
It's funny you ask that. Not so much officials in India, but it's amazing how many people across Canada, in just about every province I've been to now since India, where I've had people from Indian descent come up to me and say how disgusted they were with our prime minister on that trip and how embarrassed they were that he was representing us in India. That is their culture, and obviously they still feel very close to their Indian roots. And I could tell you more than a dozen times, people have just walked up to me at an event or after I've given a speech somewhere and told me how upset they were that happened.
Would you say that the equivalent would be Donald Trump dressing up in the Mounties red serge for a visit up here?
For sure. Yeah, that would be exactly right. Like it's, you're the prime
Which
minister.
would be hilarious, by the way.
I'd like to see that hair of Donald Trump underneath a nice felt hat, but yeah, or if he came up here dressed as a lumberjack or something like that and went to meetings, you would never ever see another leader of a G7 country act the way that he did. So it started with India, but now we obviously have China. But we have lost export markets for agriculture to India, Vietnam, Italy, China. We have upset the United States, obviously, Japan, Australia. And it all goes to United States and China for sure. It goes back to Justin Trudeau going to those countries on trying to negotiate or renegotiate free trade agreements. And he said, my priorities are gender equality, climate change, labor rules. These are not economic issues. And we've seen the results.
Their ideologies.
Their ideology. And he's virtue signaling to other major countries who have said, you know what, if that is your attitude, there's the door. And this has got us in this situation we're in now.
Well, I guess you see it in these videos at the G20 or G7, whatever these big meetings are. And it is freaking embarrassing. I almost feel bad for the guy on a personal level because he's like the most unpopular kid at school. He doesn't get to sit and eat with anybody. Nobody will talk to him. Nobody will invite him over to kick the ball around.
Right.
Everybody he goes up to, he gets the cold damn shoulder to an extreme.
Mm-hmm.
To an extreme. Now, what's that doing to our country that all these other leaders literally turn their back to him in public?
Yeah, he's in the lunchroom at the table eating by himself, and that says a lot about the situation we are in. And I agree. I was embarrassed to see, when he walks up to his table and looks at Xi Jinping of China, the one he should be talking to.
Oh, God.
Looks scared out of his wits and doesn't want to talk to him. So looks to his left to try and find someone else to talk to and gets the cold shoulder.
Well, I've never seen it in my life. He actually extended his hand to the guy, and the guy looked at his hand and turned around to somebody more interesting and started chatting with them and embraced the other person.
Yeah.
It's, it's a bit of an insult to our country because love him or hate him, he's our leader, and that's a bit of an FU move. On the part of the other guys, but still they got their reasons, and that's how the guy's got to go.
Well, and I think Mark, you're exactly right, and this is our prime minister, and I respect the job of the prime minister. I respect his position, but he is not respected around the world any longer, and it just shows you how far that star has fallen. When he was first elected, everybody loved the guy. He's covered Rolling Stone and all this stuff, but I think global leaders, as much as Canadians, are getting sick and tired of being lectured to by the Prime Minister of Canada. Every meeting he goes into, he's talking about his virtue signaling issues, right? And global leaders don't want to hear that. They're their own sovereign countries. They're going to do things how they want to do.
Well, we've already established he has zero ability to negotiate, and the results speak for themselves. Now, when you were on last time, I had said that a friend of mine had coined at the negotiation table, Trudeau versus Trump is like Bambi versus Godzilla. And being that the U.S. is our major trading partner, about 80% of our trade, give or take, how much is that hurting? Is the U.S. eating our lunch?
The U.S. is eating our lunch. There's no question about it. We took some major hits on the new NAFTA agreement. It hasn't been ratified yet. It won't be ratified now until, late next fall at the earliest, because the United States Congress has arisen for their break. But you look at steel, aluminum tariffs, no softwood lumber agreement. Our agriculture has taken a huge hit. That is 80% of our market. And energy, it was just announced yesterday that the United States has now surpassed, is now number one energy supplier in the world because we are landlocking our own resources. The United States lifted their export ban. They are now energy self-sufficient. We could be going along those same routes, but we're doing everything possible to cripple our own economy.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Elon Musk genius, 1 being you need to be in a group home.
Okay.
Where's our prime minister?
Oh man, that's tough. I don't know him personally enough to say that. I can just
based on his policies, decisions.
I would just on his decisions, I would put him as a 5.
I put him at a 2, but
I'm being a little bit more generous. Maybe.
Might be a little bit more generous, and I'm not saying it to be a dick.
Yeah.
I'm saying it because that's what I actually believe.
Right.
He's an empty shirt. He's an empty suit.
Well, maybe to a certain extent, but I think he is just so focused on what he wants to accomplish and not caring about even his own cabinet, but certainly not Canadians. I think his focus is being celebrated within that real elite circle of, the Leonardo DiCaprios and the George Clooney's and the Bonos and those types of people. Like that's where he gets his thrills, as if he gets a tweet from some celebrity saying, what, great, love your position on climate change, way to, phase out Canada's oil sands, and then he apologizes that he can't do it quick enough. I think that's where he gets his focus and his goals are, rather than what's best for Canada, and that is where the crux of his prime ministership has been.
Do you have to be the government to direct the RCMP to investigate something, or can the official opposition do it?
We can request an investigation, but we cannot, as opposition, force the RCMP to do an investigation. And technically, the government can't do that either. It's up to the RCMP to make that decision. But I'm not naive. I would think if the Minister of Public Safety, Ralph Goodale, were to request the RCMP to look into something, they would.
And has there been a request to investigate the Trudeau Foundation?
Not that I'm aware.
Why would that be? I mean, it's pretty blatant that they're taking graft.
Mm-hmm.
SNCLavalin is one of the big things. Like, they are accepting bribes.
Yeah, and my understanding is one of the directors or executive directors of the Trudeau Foundation is a board member of SNCLavalin. So there's way too much overlap in terms of
Christ Almighty,
of where whose hand is shaking who, and I think that just goes back again to the SNCLavalin affair and those types of things. Is that Justin Trudeau has become much too cozy with those corporate boardrooms in Eastern Canada.
The last thing I want is what's happening in the States with, it's now wrapped up, a 2-year witch hunt for Russians that aren't there, and it was a witch hunt. It was completely baseless. There was nothing to it. But the Trudeau Foundation is not baseless. It is blatant. Why are we not pushing that issue? I mean, not just to win an election, but because it's right.
Right.
Because the guy's a criminal. Why aren't we pushing that?
Yeah, I can't answer that. I'm not sure if anybody else has put in a request. I'll follow up and see. I personally have not, but let me see and if there has been an ATIP request even or formal letter asking the RCMP to investigate the connections.
Well, if we don't, then we're living in a caste system, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then there's a law for you and a law for me.
Right.
Two different laws. And right now, he's not been held accountable. And this one is so blatant that I couldn't do it.
No.
You couldn't do it.
No.
We couldn't set up a shell foundation and accept graft.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's Justin Trudeau's whole thing is in his Liberal cabinet that there are a certain set of rules for them and a certain set of rules for everybody else.
It's got to end.
Yeah.
It's got to end. I mean,
but this is a Liberal legacy. This is how they've always done things. As much as I would have respected Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien, we didn't necessarily agree on a lot of policy.
I like Chrétien, actually.
But they were fiscally responsible. Ad scam certainly was their undoing or one of their undoing. But Justin Trudeau was not Paul Martin or Jean Chrétien. This guy is taking that party so far left. They are, I would say, closer to socialism than they are.
They're not liberals anymore.
No, I would agree.
And the same thing is happening in the States right now with, what do they call them? The Crew, the Tribe, the Five, whatever they are, with AOC and all that. Liberalism is something that I actually am a bit of a fan of, done right. But that's not what they are anymore. No. They're not liberals. They're leftists. They're way, way, way off the charts, and they bear no resemblance to the Liberal Party of 12 years ago.
Right.
At all.
And I think that's where our opportunity is, I'll say, is in this coming election, we are going to be talking about the economy. We're going to be talking about jobs. We're going to be talking about getting out of control spending back in line. We're going to talk about how the importance of trade and global leadership. They're going to be talking about their crazy spending. They're going to be giving everything to everyone who wants it. And they're going to be calling us homophobes, racists, climate change deniers. We're going to be focusing on the issues that are important to Canadians. They're going to be focusing on their own ideology.
Does the rest of the country give a shit that Alberta is in a lot of pain and has been for 4 years?
I would say it's not as isolated as we think out in Alberta, and I can certainly understand that because we absolutely feel like we are alone on this island, and the rest of Canada doesn't understand the important role that Alberta plays. Like, we have been the economic engine of this country for decades. The urban Toronto, downtown Toronto resident Canadian does not understand it at all. And I've spent a lot of time in Ontario, obviously, over the last 5 or 6 years. And it is disconcerting, the lack of understanding of how Canada works and each role that each province plays. But I would say a lot of people understand it. They're just not very vocal about it. I'll give you an example. I was in Burnaby when the Liberals made the announcement to support Trans Mountain for like the third time. And I was in Burnaby meeting with residents and just stakeholders, but people on the street, asking them, supporting Trans Mountain, how important this is. I was overwhelmed. The majority of people in Burnaby supported the Trans Mountain pipeline. And I'm like, well, where are you? Like, how come we don't hear about it? All we hear is that, the people, chaining themselves to machinery and locking themselves to the gates, including 2 MPs, Elizabeth May and now the new mayor of Vancouver. But I think Canadians are getting it. We still have to keep explaining it to them, but it's coming. We just need to get them to be vocal and get proactive and get our message, to get them to get us, get that message out there.
Liberals are making a lot of claims that the economy is doing great everywhere but Alberta. Any truth to that?
The economy is doing well in certain areas, but you bring up a good point, and I would like to put it this way, is the energy sector is booming in every country in the world except for 2, Venezuela and Canada. What does that say about how we are treating our energy economy and our number one revenue generator in this country?
Well, are they not booming in part because we're limping?
100%. Like the void that we have left in that market is being filled up by other countries. And that's where the activists in Canada have to understand. If it's not supplied by Canada, who does it better and under the most strict environmental regulations in the world, it's going to be supplied by someone else who doesn't follow those rules.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the myth of dirty oil. Now, is it not true? I sound like a lawyer when I word it that way. Is it not true?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah. But is it not true that California oil is actually considerably more dirty, quote unquote, than Alberta oil?
True. It is.
So help me with this.
Sorry,
So how is it that we are so ineffective at debunking the myth of dirty oil?
Because as Canadians, we're apologists. We do not have the pride that we should have. I'm not saying everyone, but certainly when it comes to defending what we do best. And I would say 2 things, agriculture and energy. We are letting those opponents drive the narrative. We have to say enough. We have to start being proud of what we do, whether it's in farming and ranching or energy development, because we do it better than anyone. But for some reason, it's so easy for us to say sorry. And that's why we are being targeted, because those activists and those funding this activist, and it's definitely by the great work of Vivian and Krause has shown that, millions of dollars from foreign countries are being flooded into Canada to fund these activists. We are just too easily saying sorry, and we'll clean up our mess. What mess? Have you been to Fort McMurray? Have you seen a well reclamation?
So Vivian Krause, tell me if I got this right. Vivian Krause, and you notice how the media, who you defended last time, doesn't really talk about it. There's no coverage of the Vivian Krause report. But is not the long and the short of it is that foreign interests, in particular the United States, so that they look after their own oil and gas, are bashing the bejesus out of our oil and gas. And that's where the myths actually come from of dirty oil and all that. It's because there are huge PR firms funded by competing countries and competing interests to bash us, which has worked.
Yeah.
Is that the long and the short of it?
I'd say that's fairly accurate.
God damn it!
Yeah. Well, you just follow the money, and that's what. And I'm really excited actually that Jason Kenney, the new premier of Alberta, has that energy war room. They have done started a public inquiry into where the funding is coming from. I think this will shine a light. I think there's still a lot of Canadians out there who are going, come on, this is just a conspiracy. There's not, the Tides and Lead Now and these groups aren't funded by American interests. Absolutely they are. When they landlock Canadian energy, what does that do for Americans? It lets them fill that void. Not only that, but when we are selling, and this is what Canadians really need to understand, is when we are selling our energy to the United States at a massive discount. So when you see, oil is $60 a barrel, well, that's West Texas Intermediate. That's not Canadian crude. So it's at $50 a barrel. We're selling it to the Americans for $25. They're refining it and then selling it globally at a $25 per barrel profit. So Canadians need to understand that when that on the base of that debt differential, they are building a school every week in the United States. They're building a hospital every month in the United States, subsidized by the Canadian taxpayer, because they are making the profit on our oil. Those are royalties and revenue, tax revenue that should be here in Canada that is going to the United States, and they're the ones benefiting from it. We should be building that infrastructure here in Canada. Energy is what is building that infrastructure. Social programs is funded by our energy sector. And right now it's going to the United States, and we're the ones who are suffering.
The blue wave right now, which is interesting. Makes it sort of optimistic that conservatives are actually going to win this election. I believe, and I think you're right, it'll probably be a squeaker. But it depends how good the ads are and the campaign is run to resurface all of the major issues. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of talk about the Alberta provincial election and Ontario with Kenney and Ford is going to hurt the national brand. Now, to that, I'm a member of the UCP here in Alberta, but I'm not a big Kenney fan. And that was the general sentiment. A lot of people were like, oh, God, of course I have to vote UCP, but Jesus, Kenney, really?
Yeah.
And because of his history. And I think the best example was when his good friend, the radio guy there, what's his name, that really ripped him a good one.
Oh, Charles Adler.
Charles Adler.
Yeah.
And they're friends.
Yeah.
But he took him to school.
Yeah, I was a little surprised.
Yeah, he took him to school, Charles Adler. But he was saying what a good chunk of us are thinking. Mm-hmm. And he lost a lot of swing votes. He still won by a huge majority, but thank God. Thank God he did. But he missed a lot of votes, and there's a lot of swing votes because people are just not comfortable with them. Mm-hmm. So between Kenney and Ford, are they going to help you or hurt you?
No, I think they'll help. I think Jason Kenney over the last several months from when he won the election has really shown Albertans who he is. And I've worked with Jason for many years. There's no more hardworking politician in Canada, I would argue.
Is he a good dude, though?
He is a good guy. Yeah, I know he gets a bad rap, and I don't know where this rap comes from because I've never seen anything along those lines at all.
Well, but the history. I mean, Adler brought it up, like college days in San Francisco, saying, hey, gay guy, you can't see your gay partner in the hospital even though he's dying of AIDS. No, you're not allowed to have family rights.
Yeah.
And he was laughing about it and bragging about it.
Yeah.
Now, not to say a man can't change. If I was held accountable for the shit I was doing in my early 20s, I'd be digging a ditch somewhere. Yeah. Not that there's anything wrong digging a ditch.
No.
I mean, God help me if any of my old stuff surfaces up if I ever run for office.
Yeah, no Facebook back then, thankfully.
Yeah, thank God. And very few witnesses.
Right.
But so, I mean, I'll give them that. But things that are so ingrained, like thinking that gays are all going to hell kind of attitude, that's a tough shift. And even on the Charles Adler show, I didn't hear Kenney actually. He sidestepped it. He didn't say, I was wrong. Those views were medieval, and I've had a complete change of perspective. He never said that.
Yeah. I can't answer for Jason. I can just tell you my experiences with Jason. And I have never, when we were in government, he was one of the most successful immigration ministers we ever had. He was his whole program was to bring in gay men from Middle East countries who were being persecuted. We had a massive immigration program from that. So for someone who, my argument would be, well, if people think that he's a lake of fire type of guy, why would he be championing that program at a federal level? I've never seen any element of that from Jason in my own personal experience.
That didn't help either. The actual lake of fire guy got voted in anyway.
Yeah, I don't know whatever happened to him. Like, he's not around anymore.
You know, he's in.
No.
He's in the cabinet, for Christ's sake.
No.
Yes, he is.
No,
Well, maybe there's two Lake of Fire guys.
maybe there is. Oh, I think you're. Yes, the original Lake of Fire guy ran in 2014 with Danielle Smith's Wild Rose. He was not elected.
Oh, okay.
But I know who you're. His name is slipping my mind, but he was an education critic, I think.
Yeah,
under
that
the
sounds right.
Previous regime, yeah.
Yeah, but he's in. Ward. Is it Ward?
Ward Smith. Man, I feel really bad now.
Smith. That sounds about right.
Is it Mark Smith?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, that could very well be.
But he's in, and that was surprising to me because we're past that now. You know,
I think we are, but
as a society, we're past that.
His constituents are elected him, right? Yeah. So he's not in cabinet.
No, you're right there.
Yeah, he's not in cabinet.
Not in cabinet, but he did get elected.
Yeah. But I don't think Doug Ford and Jason are going to hurt us. I think we have a very unique opportunity right now. Right now, we have conservative governments across Canada, almost from coast to coast. Other than BC, we have them all the way to the Atlantic coast and New Brunswick. This is a window of opportunity we must take advantage of, and that's why we've brought forward the energy corridor to build a corridor across Canada from coast to coast and north and south for oil pipelines, for rural internet, for hydro lines, all of these things done. I think Canada is now, because we've talked about this to a great extent, Canada has become a can't-do country. That is not what we are historically known for. We built the National Railway that brought this country together. We feel that the National Energy Corridor can do much the same. That we need to be a country again that can get things done, can get big projects built, a country of big ideas, and the National Energy Corridor is something that I think will do that. And this is our chance to do it with conservative governments across Canada, provincially, and hopefully nationally as well.
What is the plan, or is there a conservative plan for environmental issues?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you asked that, Mark, because I am extremely proud of our environmental plan that we have taken more than 2 years to put together. We unveiled it, I want to say 2 months ago, just before the House rose. It is the most in-depth environment policy ever tabled by a Canadian political party. And all of us had a lot of input in what this was going to look like. And it is based on innovation and technology, not on taxes. So we will scrap the carbon tax. Nowhere has that been proven to reduce GHG emissions. It's a revenue generator. It's a tax plan, not a climate plan, not an environment plan. So a few elements that I'm really excited about in our environment plan is number one, bring back the green home renovation tax credit. So Canadians across Canada, if you want to put in energy efficient windows, energy efficient furnace, you can have a home renovation tax credit to do that. These things will have definitive impact on our environment. Also, certainly, we talked briefly about that is exporting our products around the world. Not only our LNG and our energy to displace dirtier energy in other parts of the world, which we have to start thinking of climate change as a global issue. It can't be on it can't be a burden on Canada's shoulders alone. It has to be something we think about globally. That's what our environment plan will do, with some innovation and technology aspects to that, but also export our innovation, our skill set, the things that we have done in Canada better than anybody else. Let's share those innovations with the world as well. Help them improve how they develop their resources as well. So there are some really exciting aspects to our climate plan, and you can see it at arealplan.ca. Everything is there, and I hope constituents take a chance to look it through.
I'm going to shift gears for a second, and then I think we're just about out of time. Last time you were on the show, I've really got to give you a shout out. I gave you a hard time. I gave you a noogie about not knowing about Meech Pocket.
Oh yeah.
Now, I was just at our regimental 105th anniversary in Manitoba, Shiloh, right, where that's the 2nd Battalion, and they're the ones that were at Meech Pocket. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of chat about that there. There's buildings named Meech this and Meech that. And for those that don't know, Meech Pocket is the largest battle since Korea. Basically, the Canadians were absolute heroes and saved an entire Serb village from the Croats. And had they not done that, yet another village would have been wiped out, man, woman, and child. But the Canadians stepped in and said no, and fought for 3 days. Not a single Canadian life was lost, and there were serious casualties on the other side, and they did not mess with the Canadians after that. But the bottom line is that the lives were saved, and you didn't know about that, and I gave you a hard time.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so.
And but you went and you actually read the book, The Ghosts of Medak Pocket, then messaged me about it later, and hat off to you, John Barlow, for doing that. Thank you for doing that, and I hope, have you had conversations with any of your fellow MPs about this?
Yeah, we definitely have talked about it to a great extent, and thanks for you for recommending that, or calling me out that I should know more about that that particular battle that I did not know about, and I'm so thankful now that I've read the book, and I think the biggest eye opener for me, I guess, is how we have failed to treat our veterans when they have come back from situations like that, and you read through the book and you just cannot believe what our soldiers were put through. You know, imagine a war, an ethnic war between two different countries. I guess not even countries at that point.
No, it was one country. It was a civil war.
Civil war between two ethnic groups, and you are stuck in the middle, and you cannot. You're told not to fight back and just take it. And they're taking pot shots at you and almost laughing that you can't do anything about it until a group of Canadian soldiers, as other countries are running away, saying, we don't want any part of this, we can't take it. A very ill-equipped group of Canadians at that said enough is enough, and they took things into their own hands and protected that village. But I think the most that
CBC needs to make a movie about it, John.
I agree with you. This has to be something that
Paul Gross, you listening?
Every Canadian should know about of what these soldiers did, but also the ramifications, the long-term ramifications on these soldiers when they came home. Mental issues, suicides, and how they just did not receive the help that they deserved and they desperately needed. And this is an issue that has become very important to me. And we have a good team within our Conservative caucus who, right now the rolling barrage is making its way across Canada. They were in Ottawa this weekend. They'll be in Okotoks on August 18th.
I'll be joining them for a ride.
I don't ride, but I will be there on the 18th as well.
All right.
We need to be talking about these issues.
And we are talking about them more than we ever have, thank God. They're still wildly misunderstood. And a little announcement on this show I'll make here. I'm starting a second show. I will keep the Mikey Show podcast because I love it.
As you should.
We've really made some progress with this show. But I'm starting a second show called Operation Tango Romeo, the trauma recovery podcast for veterans and first responders. It is for those who do not have access to help, resources, peer support. So that will be that show. And we already have a sponsor lined up that we're in negotiations with right now. And away we go.
That's great. Congratulations. I'll be a fan for sure.
Fantastic. John Barlow, thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for being on the show today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and keep up the good work. You talk about very important issues, Mark, and I love the way that you don't pull punches. It's important that people feel free to speak their mind. And
so you'll be back then. I didn't beat you up too bad?
People can't see I am bleeding a little bit, but it's okay. I don't mind.
All right, and here we go.